Today I'm going to be talking about following what you are very passionate and interested in versus what someone else, whether it's your family or maybe a certain person or organization, wants you to follow. And today we're going to use the example of Michael Dell. I just found out about him. He currently has a net worth of $22 billion. And long story short, he was at a time where his parents wanted him to be a doctor. And he didn't want to do that. And his grades weren't doing that well. And he chose to do what he wanted to do. And it finally led to him creating a company that provided massive wealth, much more than a doctor would have done. So before I continue though, there's a huge disclaimer I want to put onto this. This example, along with other examples I've recently stumbled across, it's amazing how many different examples I come across. Oftentimes, they just didn't fling themselves at it. They had a very exceptional skill and they could see the potential of it and growth of it. And had they failed, they had a backup which would have put them back in school or something else. Now, it's oftentimes not always the case. Sometimes if they didn't do that, they may have been just shit out of luck and ended up very poor and unable to go back to school and so forth. But as far as Michael Dell was concerned, he had all these things going for him. So it's very important that you don't just follow this blindly. It's very clear to have a proven track record, and for Mr. Dell, he had deep knowledge, very deep knowledge, and incessantly ridiculous to the point of crazy passion for computers. To the point where he literally ripped apart his computer that he had gotten for his 15th birthday as soon as he got it, just to figure out how each specific piece worked together and put itself together. So you can already see the inklings of his deep interest for computers there. And it goes on and on. He apparently skipped school for weeks on end to attend this convention, this computer convention, back in the 60s when computers were a new thing. So you can kind of see how that's going, and it's very interesting to see how these dynamics work. I do think that a lot of places like Australia, United States, Canada, Europe, they allow this sort of potential to blossom for these deep interests to actually manifest itself. There's actually that possibility there. Although oftentimes there are things working against you, at least there's that possibility there. Whereas other countries, you only have that one job. Think of North Korea. You only have that possibility. Like you can only do this occupation. There's nothing else. You could have the greatest potential in the world to become someone like Michael Dell, and you would never achieve it. Having said that, though, things are not perfect in life still. The system, based on how things work. And as a parent, I can understand how Michael Dell's parents were like this. I see it in, surprisingly, a lot of the ethnicities, the more I talk to different people. African Americans as well. I thought it was just the Asian American culture, but you see it everywhere. There is a bit of pressure sometimes, not always, Not everyone who goes to med school is pushed. A lot aren't. A lot want to do this. A lot may have been pushed by their parents and have subconsciously convinced themselves that they want to do it themselves. Others are a mixture. Others may completely want to do it themselves and their parents want them to do something else, but they chose to be a doctor. So there's all these factors going at it, and Michael Dell showed a knowledge for understanding that, hey, maybe I don't have to please everyone. Maybe what my loved ones think I should do isn't the right thing to do. And so here he was in college, first year, His grades weren't doing so well at all. Everything's going not so well, but he's really getting into this computer stuff, and he realizes there's a huge market. He's realized it for a while, and he's starting to he already's thinking, okay, I think there's a huge market for a lot of money to be made. And it wasn't something very vague. It was very specific. He understood it because at the time IBM was selling PCs, computers, and they would buy these parts for very cheap, sell them to the retailers who would then sell them to everyone else for 3 or 4 times the price of the actual parts. And it was just ridiculous because these retailers literally did nothing. They just like brought the finished PCs in. They provided no value. So he was like, why don't I cut out the middleman, and we would save the customers a lot of money, and at the same time we would make a lot of money from this. And so that was his thinking, or that was his final business model. So he was sort of thinking through that, and then his dad comes in for a visit to his college dormitory, and he's like, you have to straighten things out, or something. Like, this isn't working. What do you plan to do with your life? We want you to become a doctor. This guy's white, by the way. And he says, well, I want to compete with IBM. And so then, as the months go by, he decides, I'm not going to tell my parents, but I'm going to drop out of college, and I'm going to start this whole thing. It's kind of scary, you know. I'm kind of scared, but worst comes to worst. Based on how my college works, I can re-enter and work back where I left off if I fail this. But I do think there's a huge market. So he buys a whole office space, hires some people, and gets to work on this thing. And then he starts adding things where he can customize with the customer, and then he adds all these cool things that makes Dell unique. And lo and behold, boom! After 10, 15, 20 years of work, his company has grown to immense proportions. And for me, you know, Dell first emerged into my life a few years ago. My father is a huge technology enthusiast. Just naturally, I don't know where he got it from. He just, like, he was always at the cusp, adopting, installing, putting on new things. He wasn't always like the super early bird, but he was pretty early on. And for me, Dell came into my life through the Dell monitors. And I think we bought a few Dell computers as well, but it was usually like monitors. And when I first saw them, and they replaced the old clunky huge monitors, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, they look so high tech. Because they were like flat screens. By flat screens, they were like this thick. But they were monitors that worked. And I was like, this is awesome. Because before that, there's these huge white clunky things that we use for our computers. And again, every day I'm amazed at the progress of technology. And yeah, that's all I want to say. Again, it's interesting. I've seen other recent stories about people who have chosen to not follow what their parents wanted them to do, and follow what they wanted to do themselves, a deep interest. But again, as a disclaimer, as I've mentioned before, these people had very distinct, measurable skill sets that were valuable, and they knew it, and they were talented in this area, and they grew that. It's not like if you think you have skill and you don't, and you have no like real competitive edge against all those people competing against you, you're gonna be screwed over. Like, so don't just drop what you're doing, whatever you're studying, and then just follow like singing or something like that. I mean, even if you have exceptional singing talent, you have to first check yourself. Like, you have to check yourself with the objective audience, like people who don't know you personally. Put your singing online and get a decent sample size. If you get like 50% dislikes, maybe you're not as great a singer as you think. I've seen people who are very there's so many people delusional about their singing abilities. It's crazy. And then even if you are that good, the competition is so fierce. Like singing is like one of the things that's like everyone's trying to be good at and rise to the top at. Just look at the show The Voice. I was just watching that show, and literally you see like these blind auditions every episode, and literally there's like at least 200 people auditioning blind, which means you don't see them. They just hear your voice, and then if they like you, they'll hit the buzzer. And then like by the fifth episode, those 200 people get cut to like what, 50 people, and it gets worse and worse. And if you research the show, like other singing competitions I've researched and watched, I mean, I love them, but before you even get to that part where you're on TV, you have to go through like 3 or 4 rounds of auditioning and cutting for the millions of people who audition. It's incredibly competitive. So you really have to make sure it's something that you can be the top at, and that requires the right amount of practicality. And having the right amount and separating it from delusion is a very difficult thing to get just right. But try and get as close as you can. As always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. This is Will, and I will be seeing you guys later.